The New York Times has run this story. Can we turn this screen off? It's kind of distracting. Can you see? Yeah. The New York Times has run this story saying that Bill O'Reilly paid out $32 million to keep Lise Wheel, one of the, I think she was a legal analyst at Fox, a very attractive lady, and to have her be quiet about sexual harassment and possible. They use the phrase non-consensual sexual conduct or something like this. I mean, yeah, exactly. I was thinking, do you need more than 4 letters to spell that? And, I've been thinking about this because I've been hammering Weinstein. We've all been hammering Weinstein. We all just assume Weinstein is guilty. O'Reilly is putting up a defense. O'Reilly has said repeatedly, he hasn't done anything wrong and that he's got information, but he can't bring it out and all this stuff. And he just pays this money to make this go away because it's destructive to his family. Here is O'Reilly talk to Glenn Beck. This is cut number 6, basically saying why he can't entirely defend himself.
Number one, I want the story to go away because it's brutalizing my family. And number 2, I'm not going to run and hide because I didn't do anything wrong. And I think that the evidence that we've put forth is very strong, very compelling, that the New York Times wants to take me out of the marketplace. This is the second time they've attacked me. And the article on Sunday regurgitated the first article. That was like 75% of it. They had to run it twice in case you didn't get it last April. And they know that I'm in a disadvantage because I can't comment specifically on any case that has been resolved. That's one of the
stipulations.
Legal, compelling things that when you resolve something, it is always done in a nobody says anything. And you know who knows that best? The New York Times.
So David French has a piece at the corner where he says it's time for Bill O'Reilly to be Weinstein. In other words, that conservatives should stop running cover for him or staying out of it, and we should treat him the same way that we treat Harvey Weinstein. And look, my first reaction when I hear that you paid somebody $32 million to keep his mouth shut is my first reaction is to compare that to how much money I've paid people to keep their mouth shut, which is none. And because there's nobody who's trying to say anything about me because I don't sexually harass people, and with the exception of Austin, I try to I try to treat people with respect, but no court on earth would convict me for disrespecting Austin. But there is one thing that keeps me from just unleashing on the guy, and that's Glenn Beck. And actually, this is something I want to talk about. This is actually it's a little personal, but when I started doing this, nothing could have been stranger or more alien to my personal makeup than coming and sitting in front of a camera and being on a microphone and talking without preparation. I have lived my life as a writer, and as a writer, I'm an incredibly careful writer. Anybody will tell you, I rewrite everything again and again and again until I get it right. And sometimes when I'm sending it out to the publisher for the last time, I'm still correcting it. And Michael Knowles and I are doing this Another Kingdom, which I hope you'll subscribe to on YouTube. And as Knowles is performing it, I'm rewriting some of the text because I eventually, I suppose, I'll publish it as a novel as well, And so I'm rewriting and all this stuff. The idea that I would come on and just talk off the top of my head, and the stuff I said would then be captured on tape, and anybody could listen to it, and you could basically hold it against me if I made a mistake. There are only 2 things so far that I really regret. And one of them is when James Comey first came into the news, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I would not do that today. That was a big, big mistake. I mean, James Comey, I now think, is a very sinister figure, and I will talk about that if I have time today. But the other are a couple of jokes I made about Glenn Beck. And Beck has never said a word about this to me, and I don't want anything from Glenn Beck. I'm just saying this out of my own personal feelings. It's easy for me to make jokes about Glenn Beck because Glenn has a natural person. I worked for Glenn for about 6 months, and I really like the guy. I like the guy a lot. And he he has a natural personality where any event that happens, he can sort of connect the dots to the worst possible outcome. I mean, that's part of his charm and part of his show. And I have the opposite personality, which is that anything that happens, I can connect the dots. It's going to be fine. You know? And it's just a personality thing. I would tease Glenn to his face when I worked with him. I would tease him on his own air, and he never objected to it and all this stuff. But I felt when I first came on, I made jokes about it without realizing the power of the microphone, without even realizing I was actually talking to actual human beings. And I just really regret it, because Glenn is a 5-star character in my book. I mean, I worked with him, I worked around him, I worked with the people who worked with him. And a lot of people in this business are, a lot of the women in this business are very attractive women. They loved Glenn. They spoke about Glenn the way I would hope people who worked for me would speak about me, as a mentor and a friend and a supporter, and not one of them ever said, oh, and don't go in a room alone with Glenn. There was nothing like that, ever. So the fact that Glenn Beck, so I just want to say that, Glenn, if you ever hear this, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. It's just the way, we all have to learn. We all have to learn, go on our learning curve. But anyway, the fact that Glenn Beck is standing up for O'Reilly is the only thing that gives O'Reilly any credibility at all in my book. Because, listen, I feel 100% certain that if O'Reilly has done anything bad, Glenn Beck has never seen it. And as a good and loyal friend, he would stand up for his loyal friend, having no proof of it. So it's, Glenn is not dispositive proof that O'Reilly is innocent, but it's the only thing that gives me hesitation, because if you've paid, as the New York Times says, up to $45 million in hush money to people, and O'Reilly has not denied this. He just basically is saying, well, I'm a big target and I have to make things go away. Now, he says that Media Matters targeted him. That happened to Glenn, by the way. What Media Matters does, it's a Soros corporation. What's the guy's name? David Brock, who is this left-wing hitman, basically. Obviously not a literal hitman, but David Brock runs Media Matters. And what he does is he assigns somebody to, if he feels that you're getting in the way of his guys, Clinton or Obama, he hires people to listen to every single word you say. And then when they catch you saying something, and we all say untoward things, we're making jokes, we're talking off the top of our heads, everybody says stuff. Remember, who was it they got? They got him so fast. Don Imus. He made a joke about a girls' basketball team, and he said something, they're nappy-headed hoes, And that was Don Imus. Imus had been saying stuff like that forever. Is that an offensive thing to say? Yeah, it's transgressive humor. It's out there. It's all this stuff. But what they do then is they build it up, and they get some commentators to commentate on it. They get some op-ed people to write about it. And, even a person who might like Don Imus says, yeah, that was kind of going over the top. And then Imus comes out and apologizes, and when he apologizes, they've got him, because then they start to say, oh, you're guilty, and they chase him down. And they did that to Beck. Like I said, everybody says things that they wish they hadn't said, but they just listen to you and listen to you and listen to you, and then they organize sponsor boycotts. And so that's what O'Reilly is saying happened to him. But this $45 million, what are you paying people to be quiet about for that kind of money? That does not make any sense to me whatsoever. And the thing about these non-disclosure agreements, this is a big thing that's coming out now with the Harvey Weinstein thing. People sign non-disclosure agreements. I don't even remember if I signed one here, but most of us sign them because you don't want somebody. Let's say I get in a fight with Jeremy, the God King of the Daily Wire, and he says get out, and now I'm bitter, and I say, oh boy, every day I worked there was hell, and everybody was dishonest. Suddenly I'm taking out revenge. They don't want you doing that, and well, they shouldn't, because people get angry. But a non-disclosure agreement that keeps you from reporting a rape. I mean, first of all, you shouldn't really sign that, because the guy who did that to you, I mean, if you're taking even $32 million, look, I guess we can all be bought, and $32 million is an awful lot of money. But if somebody actually assaulted you, he's going to do that again, I mean, you're taking $32 million to be quiet while somebody else down the road does this. And now, I mean, look, this is all coming unleashed in Hollywood. I don't know if you're following this, but there's this minor director, James Toback. Do you know James Toback? I mean, he directed one film. Yeah, one film back in the 90s was his big film. But he's kind of this, he's like this, kind of unattractive, big overweight guy. And he would go out in the park and tell people he was a director and get them to come back to his hotel room and all this stuff. And the other one, the big guy, is David O. Russell. He's the guy. He's a really good director. He made Silver Linings Playbook and all this. But this is the thing. You know, this stuff is coming out now, but it's been coming out all along. I mean, David O. Russell, Amy Adams, after she made American Hustle with him, came out and said, oh, it was terrible. He berated me. He made me feel bad. And Jennifer Lawrence was in that movie, too, and she was tough, and she would stand up to him. The story about Three Kings, which is an excellent film, David O. Russell's, I think that's his first movie, and that had George Clooney. The story is that George Clooney and he got into an actual fist fight because he was so, and it speaks well of Clooney, he was so abusing the lesser directors on the set that Clooney, the star, said, hey, if you're going to abuse somebody, abuse me. And they ended up rolling around in the dirt, punching each other. So this stuff is everywhere. And I mean, you know, it's going on. They had a report that it's going on in Sacramento, the state capital of California, that the government people there are harassing women. There was a report recently in Washington, D.C., that the STDs are rampant in Washington, D.C., so you know stuff is going on there, and we know what happens with interns and stuff like that. So it really is happening all over, and I think as conservatives, we obviously have to say, look, there's a special pleasure, obviously, that the left gets, for instance, if a anti-gay pastor is found in a homosexual liaison. The left will cover that endlessly, and it gives them a special glee. And I admit, I am not above this. When I see Harvey Weinstein, this major, major Democrat donor, this guy was covered up, that everybody covered up for, you know, and it just had all the most powerful friends basically paying off, you know, people are kept silent by the fact that he's giving them money. I feel the same kind of thing, a special kind of glee at this. But I think Bill O'Reilly owes it to the people who have listened to him moralize, because that's what O'Reilly is. O'Reilly's not necessarily conservative. He's a populist, and he's a moralizer. And he wagged his finger at us for 20 years on TV, and he said, this is what's right, and this is what's wrong. And I think he owes us better than I paid people off to keep them quiet, to protect my poor little children and Media Matters and stuff like that. I think we should know. I think he should release them from their agreements. I think he should let Lise Wheels talk. You know, Megyn Kelly is complaining. O'Reilly said that no one has complained about him, and Megyn Kelly went on her show. She is kind of doing it in private because nobody's watching her show. But she went on her show and said, that's not true. I know it's not true because I complained. And she read part of an email that she had written to Fox News. Here's that.
I wrote an email to the co-presidents of Fox News, Bill Shine and Jack Abernathy. An email I have never made public, but am sharing now because I think it speaks volumes about powerful men and the roadblocks one can face in taking them on. I wrote in part, perhaps he didn't realize the kind of message his criticism sends to young women across this country about how men continue to view the issue of speaking out about sexual harassment. Perhaps he didn't realize that his exact attitude of shaming women into shutting the hell up about harassment on grounds that it will disgrace the company is in part how Fox News got into the decade-long Ailes mess to begin with. Perhaps it's his own history of harassment of women, which has, as you both know, resulted in payouts to more than one woman, including recently, that blinded him to the folly of saying anything other than, I am just so sorry for the women of this company, who never should have had to go through that.
So the other thing about this is, of course, it always comes down to the women and this sexuality. You know, I always say sexual abuse is a crime for which every man has a motive. You know, we all want what women have. And like, so if you have power, there's a great motive to abuse that power with women. But the thing about these guys, a lot of these guys, is they mistreated everybody. And Harvey Weinstein, really, you know, Matt Damon was on, and Matt Damon was saying, well, let's listen. I have a cut of Matt Damon, whose career was made by Harvey Weinstein. And so he's a young actor. He's coming up. You know, he gets this big break with Good Will Hunting, a Weinstein Company. And he talks about what he knew and what he didn't know.
You had to spend about 5 minutes with him to know that he was a bully, he was intimidating. That was his legend. That was his whole kind of MO. Like, you know, could you survive a meeting with Harvey? Could you stand up for yourself with Harvey? And the people who worked for him were like, you know, I'm coming here to make good movies. Miramax was the place, really the place that was making great stuff in the 90s. So when people say, like, everybody knew, like, yeah, I knew it was, you know? I mean, he was proud of that. You know what I mean? That's how he carried himself. And I knew he was a womanizer. You know, I wouldn't want to be married to the guy, but like, I'm not, you know, it's not my business really. But this level of criminal sexual predation is not something that I ever thought was going on. Absolutely not. I knew the story about Gwyneth from Ben because he was with her after Brad. And so I knew that story.
No, you know, so you knew enough. I mean, the point is, I'm not blaming Matt Damon. I'm not blaming. I don't think you should blame all the people around these things. You know, if you weren't there, if you didn't witness it, if you didn't see it, you did not have the power to bring the guy down. And there's no point in just spreading that, you know, pointing around the people you dislike because of their politics or whatever. But the point I wanted to make is that the culture that allows powerful people to behave badly toward other people is kind of the problem, because women are obviously going to be the natural target of powerful men, but basically everybody is the target of powerful men. And when you hear me, as I often do, attacking Donald Trump for his manners, for his bullying, even though I keep saying I love some of the stuff that the guy is doing, and I kind of love the fact that he's breaking he's breaking the dishes in the Washington kitchen and all this stuff. This is the stuff that we as conservatives should be speaking about, because this is not a way, you know, it's not the way we want people to be treated. It's not, it ain't right. It ain't right. And we should stand up against it, whether it's Bill O'Reilly or Harvey Weinstein.